Hello, everybody. I'm just back from Carnmoney East Cemetry, where we've conducted a very simple graveside service for Molly McHenry. Unfortunately, Molly died quite unexpectedly, quite suddenly on Wednesday evening in Carrick Manor Nursing Home. She had the coronavirus, but we thought she'd recovered, and it's taken everyone a little bit by surprise. So with the current situation, we weren't allowed to have a church service for Molly, even though I know the family would have loved that. But we did have a very simple 10 minutes service by her grave in the cemetery there. We read Psalm 23, which was Molly's favourite psalm, and I just spoke on that for a few minutes about the hope of heaven and the support that God gives to those who are grieving. And then we prayed, remembering Molly with a moment's silence, praying for her family before we committed her body to be buried. So I know many of you will have been very fond of Molly from her time spent at Carnmoney, and maybe you knew her also from other walks of life as well. She came from quite a large family. She was the second oldest, having 5 sisters and a brother. But again, had quite a difficult early life because her parents split up when the children were quite young. And the children were all sent to be looked after in different homes, so were separated very early on in their lives. At one point, I gather Molly was even being looked after in a convent, being cared for by nuns. But in a sense, redemption came because she met Carson, her husband, when she was 15, and they were tremendously happy together. They got married. They had 2 children, Greta and then Carson. But they'd moved to England really to forge this new life together over in England. It really was a new start for Molly. She worked over in the mills there in England. I know they were very happy as they built their family life together over there. Later on, they did return back to Northern Ireland, and Molly worked at Cheryl Lord's carpet factory for some time, and then she went on and had a job at the Standards, working on the production lines there. But in the 1990s, she had some bad news in that they discovered that Carson had cancer. He was only given a few days to live, but remarkably, he ended up surviving for 3 years. And Molly retired at that point and cared for him in those last years of his life before he died in 1999. And very soon after Carson's death, Molly embarked on a world tour. She travelled down to Australia and New Zealand to meet up with members of her family. But very soon after coming back from that trip, which I think was quite hard being so soon after Carson's death, and also maybe opening up a few childhood wounds, the family noticed that she wasn't quite the same. And it was just the beginning of that dementia that Molly was to suffer from for the last 20 years of her life. She did remain, though, staying in her house in Church Road. And I know many of you will remember her because she was a regular attender at our church, Carnmoney-Parish-Church. And she, even despite her dementia, she was able to join in with the familiar hymns and follow those familiar prayers in our prayer book, just because she knew them so well. And again, I gather she was always very smart, very well turned out. She used to talk about her regular Saturday visits to Jordan's hairdressers. And again, despite the dementia, she was always very witty. She was always enjoyed fun. She was very lively, very determined in all that she did. And she did also have that personal faith in Christ. She did love her church. She was always very loyal to Carnmoney. She wanted to keep going there as long as she possibly could. In recent years, she's moved into St. Bridget's fold, where she got a bit more support. And maybe you'll remember her just standing in her doorway, talking to people as they went past. That was certainly how I met her when I first went to visit her last year. Unfortunately, she wasn't able to stay, though, in the fold, and she ended up then in Carrick Manor Nursing Home. And sadly, here that she did catch the coronavirus, which obviously weakened her very much. And as I say, she'd fought her way back to health, maybe a measure of her determined nature, but it wasn't to be, and she did pass away, possibly choking on her food, we think, on Wednesday evening. So we do remember Molly. We do give thanks for her life. And I'll just ask you, please, to remember and pray for her family in these days and weeks ahead. Please do pray for Greta, her daughter, and her husband Raymond. Please also pray for Carson, who's housebound and wasn't able to be at the funeral, unfortunately. And please also pray for the grandchildren, for Rachel and her husband Philip, for Tony and for Natalie in these days ahead. As we remember Molly now and leave her in God's care, in God's love. God bless.